Duncan Craig, hi.
James Sutton, hello.
When I decided to start a podcast, you were one of the first people that I had in mind for this show.
Oh, thank you. And you also know flattery will get you absolutely everywhere.
I know what I'm doing. It's not.
I'm a professional, darling.
I'm a professional flatterer, darling. Start with the most important question.
Yeah.
I think that you can ask any man. How are you?
Good question. How am I? I'm tired at the moment. I'm exceptionally busy. That's not necessarily a bad thing by any stretch of imagination. I like being busy. A new government has brought a whole lot of new challenges, good, bad, etc., etc. But it feels like, and I know I'm not the only person in this, so there's a bit of cold comfort. It feels like, as a charity chief exec, things have just got so busy, and there's a bit of no let up. So, but I'm coping.
Busy's good.
Yeah,
Busy's good. I find the quiet times sometimes, the times when things slow down and the mind has time to wander a little bit. I often find those as some of the more difficult times.
Yeah, I agree. I think, even as a psychotherapist and somebody who spent donkey's years in therapy, I still there's elements of me that I still struggle with quiet, and what I mean by that is boredom. I'm so cool to just go and sit somewhere and just be quiet on my own if it's what I want to do. When I'm bored, because boredom creates naughtiness, and it's like the famous quote that Bessel van der Kolk talks about as the body keeps the score. Babette Rothschild wrote a book about it, and I think quite a lot of my trauma stuff has been very much something about trying to keep the pain away has been be cheeky, be naughty, be disruptive, be so boredom. It's the one little bit that I know I can work on. I kind of don't want to. I want to know it's there. I want to know self-destruct is there.
It's an option.
But it's an absolute option. But the challenge is not pressing the fuck it button.
Yeah. I think that's something that I've definitely learned in the past sort of 4 or 5 years. I think when I went on my, I hate using this term, when I went on my healing journey, because of course I'm an actor.
Don't you wish there was like another phrase for it? I mean, I say the same thing as but yeah. I hear you.
That's one of the things is, and I've spoken quite a lot to my therapist about this, in keeping my brain active in really, really positive ways.
Yeah.
Because historically, when I had nothing to do, so I wasn't filming that day or whatever, my brain would immediately go, "We should probably drink."
Yes.
That's probably what we should do.
Sure.
And I think part of that's to alleviate boredom, and part of that is exactly what you just said, which is pressing that fuck it button.
Yeah. I also think there's something about people like you, creatives. For as long as I've known you, that you've just got like a creative energy. And you know this, but I spent years working in theatre and television, in PR, and I worked with lots and lots and lots of creative people in front of the camera, on stage, but behind the scenes as well. And actually, I'd argue some of the behind the scenes people are sometimes dangerous to be around, because that creativeness, if they're not doing something,
if there's not an outlet for it,
absolutely, drink, drugs, explosions happen all over the place. And I sometimes think for people like you, the boredom is a bit dangerous if you haven't got a pro-social, healthy, adaptive output for your creativity.
Yeah, it is a concern. I have to say,
sure.
But I think I've found a way of managing that, and I've found a peacefulness, I think, in the past 4 or 5 years, which I lacked before. And I think you know, I've been asked the question before in interviews and in various guises, you know, what's your ambition? What do you want out of life?
Sure.
And I think for me, and actually I think for most of us, is we just want peace.
Yeah.
We want emotional peace. We want spiritual peace. We want a peaceful relationship. We want a peaceful relationship with our own body.
Yeah.
We just want peace. And when I meet people and I spend time with people who are at peace, I think, God, I'd give anything to be as peaceful as you.
I agree.
We're all very, very similar, I think, in that
I agree. And I think one of the questions I absolutely despise people asking is, and I get asked it so often in interviews and particularly when somebody wants to do a kind of like, okay, so tell us about your life kind of thing. The sort of, so what's next? And I'm a bit like, can we all just shut the fuck up with the what next question? What happens if I don't think I've got anything left next? Or what happens if I don't know? Why can't I not know? Why is that a bad thing? Because sometimes I think it feels like people think that you have to have some kind of plan. And I'm like, let me be really clear. Where I am now is just one fucking accident after another. There was no plan. I'll tell you what my plan was. At 12 years old, I planned to play Mr. Mistopheles in Cats.
How'd that go?
Well, it didn't really go very well. Something about the dancing, singing, performing, something happened. I don't know. But like literally, that was the only thing. That and when I went to my careers advisor and they said, what do you want to be? My friend dared me to say a cat burglar, so I just said cat burglar. I had no idea what a cat burglar was, and I was kind of asked to leave the careers office. So I've never had a plan. I literally went from deciding that I was going to be in Cats and then that not happening. I don't think I ever actually made any effort to it. I just assumed.
Did you not get the sewing machine out and make a cat costume?
I'd never sewing machine, but I absolutely made cat costumes. Yeah, completely. And I learned how to do backward rolls and tipple overs. I mean, what more do you want? There's no like tap dancing lessons and all of that rada nonsense. I just thought, look, I've learnt the words. I've done it a million times in front of my granddad in the living room. Why can't I just be in Cats? Like, I didn't understand the whole training or that kind of malarkey. So because that sort of never automatically happened, I just kind of got a job in a toy shop and then got sacked. I then went working at Granada Television and worked on the studio tours for donkey's years. And then that was just like going to work to piss about. I still don't understand how we all got paid for just messing about on a daily basis.
That must have been brilliant.
It was so much fun. And you know how, like, sometimes I see people who have got, like, amazing relationships with people they used to work with in an office 20 years ago. And I think, oh, no. Like, just because I work with you 20 years ago doesn't mean I still have to know you. However, I still know and I'm still in contact with everybody that I work with at Granada. And there's this real kind of moment, I suppose a bit of a Woodstock moment. You know, you kind of had to be there. It had to be that time. And then from there, I decided to go and work in the theatre. And I just did a bit of a, what's it called? Yozza. I can do that. Get a job. I can do that. I just did that in every department. And then,
fake it till you make it.
Well, complete. Because everybody else is. That's the thing.
There are so many times, and I mean this sincerely, there are so many times on a daily basis where I'm on set or I'm in a meeting or I'm writing something with someone or I'm having some sort of really excellent creative experience and I'm sat there thinking, I'm getting away with it. Nobody knows I'm shit.
But everybody else is doing the same thing. When I was press and marketing at the Palace and the Opera House, I used to sit in the office having just had a meeting with, I don't know, Cameron McIntosh or whoever, and literally go back into the office and sit with my boss and just be like, do you think people are going to come down in ropes, come crashing through the window like, you're a fraud? and then realise that if everybody else is feeling like that, then it's okay. And literally, from that point, just went from this bit, that show to that show. And then I just got really bored of it. So I just thought, what should I do next? I'll go and work in drug and alcohol services, because that's what I mean, this kind of like accidental career. I'm not joking, to this day, this still right here, right now, nothing was planned.
But you're a people person at heart, you know, and whether that's in the context of wanting to help people or be around people, socialize with people. I've always thought of you as someone I could put in a room with 20 strangers, and I know that you would not only survive, but you'd have a great time.
Yeah, I honestly, I really love people. I love talking to people. I love listening. As I get older as well, I think there's really something interesting, because I think this is my peers as well, that we kind of begin to turn the volume down on our stories and turn the listening up. So like in my organisation now, so many of the staff are like, I have T-shirts that are the same age as them. You know what I mean? I'm a bit like... So, like, the other day, one of them turned 21, and I was just like, oh, my God, congratulations. They had no idea what, like... People don't celebrate 21 anymore.
Makes you sick.
It completely. But when I listen to them, and I listen to how they identify, I listen to the types of music that they are talking about, I listen to the stories of going out, and I genuinely am sat there sometimes like, oh well, in the early 90s when all of this was field, you know, I'd really feel like one of those, and I think I end up maybe a bit of living vicariously through them, and it's so exciting, and it does make me think of when I was much younger, talking to the older people in my life. So like my granddad, you know, my absolute hero in my life. There's never been and will never be anybody that I've loved as much as I loved him. And we used to talk so much, and the stories he used to tell. And as he got older, he told less stories and became more interested in talking and listening to my stories. So tragically, when he ended up having to go into a home because he had Parkinson's and he was really poorly, he'd literally be sat in the day room, for want of a better phrase, and I'd kind of go and see him every week, and he'd sit down, and he'd like literally, the nurses used to say, he just used to come alive when he walked in, and all he said was, "What's happening at the theatre?" And he just wanted me to tell him.
He just wanted to listen.
Yeah,
it's funny, isn't it? When we're young, we don't have that kind of predisposition to listen to anyone. Our brains are full of loud noises and bright lights, and you know, we're going about our business. But as you get older and you settle down, I think there's so much power in listening. I love listening. My girlfriend and I, she commented on this the other day. Actually, we don't watch TV together. We'll watch a film occasionally. But our favourite thing to do is to sit on the sofa together and put some music on and just have a chat.
Yeah.
And learn about each other and listen. And I find it fascinating. Yeah. Her life is so different to mine.
Sure.
And to hear her stories and her opinions and her views, you feel enriched by other people's experiences, don't you?
Wholly agree. I mean, I do that with Wes, with my husband, and you know, there's something about, and I know it drives him mad, but like, because he's so clever, because he's got that real clever medical maths kind of brain, whenever anything comes on the telly, like the news, and it'll say, today, the Huckenfluckenbergen has been found by the flux capacitor, and I'm like, what do you think that is? Like, how does that work? And I can see there's an element of, oh, for God's sake, stop asking questions. But sometimes I just want to listen to him.
Yeah.
I just want to hear him tell me shit.
You've had a fascinating life. I mean, by anybody's standards. I mean, I've known you for a number of years now, and I thought...
just over a decade now.
Jesus Christ.
I know.
We're so old. And I thought I better do a little bit of research and get everything nailed down, exactly the history of Duncan Craig.
Yeah.
And I found a piece online that Professor Kieran Flanagan read out from Manchester University.
Yeah.
About you getting your OBE.
Yeah, and my Medal of Honor.
And your Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
This piece of writing is, I mean, it's fascinating. I'm going to embarrass you. I'll do some highlights just for the boys and girls at home. Okay. This is honestly, if this was my story, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because when it's your story, it probably doesn't feel quite as, quite as incredible as it is to read.
No, it's just ridiculous.
Duncan Craig has made remarkable contributions to the support of male survivors of sexual abuse, rape and sexual exploitation across Greater Manchester and beyond. A survivor himself, the charity he founded, Survivors Manchester, now delivers support to over 950 men every year, and Duncan has worked with the government, the police, the NHS and the Crown Prosecution Service, influencing the development of the UK victim strategy and other policies and strategies. He and his team have worked with soap operas such as Coronation Street, Hollyoaks and now EastEnders on groundbreaking storylines dealing with male rape and sexual abuse. You've been published widely on the topic. You've worked with scholars and activists around the world, in Iceland, in the USA, in New Zealand, in Uganda, focusing on male victims and survivors of sexual violence in war and conflict. And you spent 10 years working in the theatre and arts and entertainment. You, as you said, your first job was you were doing the tours at Granada. You worked as a director of PR and marketing for a major showbiz company. You're a graduate of the University of Manchester. You've done an MA in counselling. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And in 2020, you were recognised with the award of an OBE for services to male victims of rape and child abuse.
Absolutely mental.
An OBE.
Yeah. It's...
Are you proud? In your quiet time, are you proud of yourself? Because you should be.
I've never said this. I don't think I am. And it's not that I'm disappointed. It's that when I'm working with a client, or when you and I first met, and I remember you coming to our very, very first office, and you and I sat down and we talked about stuff, and I kind of gave you this. We'd never met before, and I gave you this carte blanche to ask me any questions, and then we stayed in touch, and we became friends, and we kind of got to know each other's lives. And I still remember that first conversation where you kind of asked me to sort of tell me a little bit about your story, about what happened to you. And then when we filmed, and there was the scene in the mirror, which I've said to you before, I've only ever watched once and I can't watch again, because you took an essence of me and you played it out in the most authentic way, and it still kind of grabs me. And I watched it, and then I look at you and I feel so proud of you. That feeling that I have, the feeling that I have when I'm working with clients, etc., I don't feel that for myself, and that's not a bad thing. It's that I think there's another feeling to it, and I kind of don't want to use the same word. I think it's much more complex than that. So, on real layman's terms, do I feel proud? Yes. I know I should feel proud, and I know people are proud of me, and I'm proud of what I've achieved. But do I feel proud? No. I feel something else, but I've never learnt what the word is for it. I can't articulate it. But there's this, because most times I'm just like, oh my God, that was an adventure, wasn't it? I mean, like, the OBE, like, I'm not a royalist. I suppose more than anything, I'm probably more of a Republican than I am as a royalist. But I absolutely adored the Queen. I just think she was just fabulous, like just this little old lady that just had so much soft. I know she had hard power, as in the royal family, constitution, etc. But she had so much soft power, and I just think it was fabulous. So I saw her, the first time I ever saw her was at the Royal Garden Party. So I got invited to the Royal Garden Party, and I was just like this to Wes, right, do you want to go to this party? And he's like, yeah, where is it? At Buckingham Palace. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the ridiculousness. That's what I feel. I feel excited. I feel like this is just stupid, but in like the best way possible. That's the pride that I feel. And then seeing her at the garden party, me genuinely, because this man tapped me on the shoulder and just said, that's really funny, just came out of my mouth like, oh, she's just like a little old lady. Oh, she's probably had a fall. She's got a bang on her leg. You know, that's kind of where my head went. And so years later, being in Buckingham Palace, and you don't find out who's going to give you your honour until you're actually in the room and you're about to go in. So no one knew. And then this man, have you heard me? This bloke rocked up in some like drag, I don't know, some kind of medal drag shit. Like, I've got no Lieutenant somebody or other. And he kind of said, okay, so Her Majesty. And I was like, excuse me, what? And he was like, oh yeah, it'll be Her Royal Highness the Queen will be, and everybody in there, you could hear a pin drop. And it felt like forever. And it was probably just a second. And then walking in and thinking, oh my God, I forgot how to walk. Like literally just the panic and the sort of, then this calm. And then maybe that was a moment I felt pride, but I felt something, I think I felt what my granddad would have felt if he was alive watching it. I think that's what I felt. I don't know if it was I owned it or I was feeling something I think he would. And then doing the bow and going and pinning a medal on you. And then the most surrealist thing happens, that she just had a chat with you.
What did she say?
So the first thing she said, and sometimes I do think, have I made this up? Because it just feels so bizarre. And also, let's just put this into a bit of historical context. This was the 3rd of March 2020. We know what happens then. 13 days later, we get told to stay at home, etc., etc. If you remember, there was this whole big thing about the Queen wearing gloves. So it was on the front page of everything. She's never wore gloves before. Apparently that's not true, but she'd never worn gloves before for an inauguration, whatever it's called. So it made headlines, and there was also an a veteran. It wasn't Captain Tom; it was before that, who would like raise tons of money for a memorial for armistice. So there was tons of press around it all. So it all felt very odd anyway. And then at that moment, there was the whole Prince Andrew thing. Yeah. And I think I just became really aware at the most inappropriate moment of, oh God, you're dealing with a whole load of your son's stuff, and here's me talking about sexual violence. So there was this like real out-of-body experience. And then she said, congratulations. And I said, oh, thank you, Your Majesty. And then she said, so you're a survivor? I was going to try to do a Queen accent then.
That was pretty good.
I completely forgot what she sounded like. Right, so I believe you're a survivor. That's what she said.
So one is a survivor?
Yeah, she said something like that. And I just went, yes, Your Majesty. And then I went off on some massive tangent. I've never spoke about this before. I went off on some massive tangent about talking about a big case that we'd also just broken in Manchester, which is the Reynard Sanaga case. So the biggest rape case in British legal history. Not the biggest rape case of men, the biggest rape case ever. Reynard Sanaga raped over 200 men, majority of them heterosexual, over 4 or 5 year period, drugged them all, none of them knew, one of them woke up in the middle of it, and kind of everything sort of happened then. And so because I'd been so involved with that, I was called to a Gold Command meeting in Greater Manchester Police 7-8 hours after Snag had been arrested. So this is all like, I've been on that case for like 2 years, so this was all like really in my mind. And I do remember saying to her, yes, well, as you'll know, Your Majesty, from your constabulary, and then just started talking about the Snag case. And then in my mind, I just thought, shut the fuck up, Duncan. She's probably got no idea. And then she just started talking about the things I'd done, the campaigns that I'd been involved with, and also like some of the things that I know publicly I've never spoke about, but have been spoken about behind closed doors with government. Yeah. And then I was talking to a guy afterwards who's like one of the secretaries or something, and he said, you're really honoured to have the Queen give you your honour. And I was like, are you sure? And he said, no, she only does 1 or 2 a year, and she chooses who she wants to meet. Because I guess if you've been doing it for 70 years or whatever, she's just like, oh yeah, congratulations, Tom Jones, wonderful. What's new, pussycat? You know, that kind of stuff.
Poor Tom Jones. What has he done?
I love Tom Jones. I couldn't think of anybody else. And so
she chose you personally.
Yeah, and I think there's something interesting about that. Of maybe I am one of the few people that she's ever met that's a male that's done this kind of stuff. There was two people who had done tons around the Holocaust education, and they were both Auschwitz or Dachau survivors. And I was thinking, yeah, if I was the Queen, I'd so be picking those sorts of people, because I think I'd want to hear I'd want to shut up and hear some stories. And I do remember having in my mind, like, well, when will this finish? And the guy that tells you how to bow and stuff, he said, you will know when she's finished. And I was like, how? And he said, you'll just know. And you just do, in the most respectful way. She doesn't be like, right, shut up now, I'm done, I've got somebody else to stick a pin on. You know, it's literally like, that's wonderful. And she'll like extend a hand, and it just feels like you've read a really good book, and that's the feeling, that you can close it and go, God, I really enjoyed that.
Wow.
And then, and then next minute, I'm stood in the palace grounds on ITN News talking a whole load of waffle with a badge.
It's not a badge.
I know, that's what my niece...
It's not fucking Blue Peter.
I know. Well, my niece, right, bless her, they're Irish in this Republic, and so there's a history, if I didn't know about that, about Ireland and Britain.
There's been some troubles.
Yeah, absolutely. And so she doesn't really understand the Queen and the royal family, but of course she at that point was a 5-year-old girl. So she understands kings and queens and princesses and Shrek and all that kind of stuff. So my sister-in-law and mum said, Duncan's been to the Queen and he's got a blah, blah. And she was like, oh, wow. And then she sent me a video. My sister-in-law sent me a video. And Amelia's got... we took her to Blue Lagoon or whatever, Blue Water. So she saw all these like fish and stuff, and we had a picture taken, and it's on a lanyard. And she literally, off her own accord, she just picked it up and she said, look, I've got this award from the Queen for doing my work. Aww. And she just copied it. And so that little lanyard sometimes I think is even more special than me Blue Peter badge off better.
Oh mate, that's honestly what an amazing thing to have had happen to you. Incredible. I think I was listening to you then, and I think maybe there's a world where the reason that you don't necessarily feel pride right now is partly, I think, because you love the work that you do.
Yeah.
But also because this work isn't complete and it's
Yeah.
ongoing, and in some way you don't have time to feel proud because there's all these men that need your help.
I think that's a really good point, actually. Something I'd never thought of that, but I think you're probably right. I'm still on the front line fighting, so I can't take a step back. And as you were reading that thing out from Professor Dr. Flanagan, weirdly, I know him from when I worked at Granada Studios tour, and then I just hadn't spoken to him for 25 years or something. And then 25 years later, he's written this thing and he's presenting me to Dame Nancy Rothwell for this Medal of Honor from the university, like the highest medal that one can be given from a university. And it was said then, like, at that point, 950. So that was 2020, I think. So the facts and the figures now is the organisation supports over 2,500 men every single year. Wow. We have 58 staff. We work across across the UK, mainly now, still based in Greater Manchester and the Northwest. So we have services in all 15 prisons across the Northwest. Wow. So every single prison has in the Northwest has our service in there.
Men have access to that support.
Yeah, real pioneering service. And again, I suppose a bit like the whole organisation, a bit like sitting talking to you and then going into the writer's room at Hollyoaks or Corrie or EastEnders and saying, well, I think you should do this and I think you should do that. Or working in the theatre and knowing that, you know, there's a show coming in 6 months' time and I've got to get a bum on every seat. These little ideas just come out of my brain and things just end up happening. So, yeah, when I think about the fact that never before has there been a service for men in prison who are survivors, and that's not to excuse any of their behaviours. I say this directly to the men that I work with. You know, and we're working with people who have committed some of the most horrific offences known to man, including sexual offences, murder, sexual offences, serious organised crime, stuff that is, people are supposed to be in prison for that. That's exactly where they should be.
That doesn't mean they don't deserve support.
Exactly. And also, it doesn't mean that we should ignore the causes of these issues. So somebody picks up a knife and stabs somebody, that absolutely is on them. They're the only people that should be taking responsibility for that. Now, if somebody grew up in a domestic abuse household, if someone was sexually abused as a child, that doesn't give them the right to then go out and be angry at the world and stab somebody. However, if we don't understand the cause of it, so I talk more about thinking less about thinking of this as an excuse and try to think of it more as a reason. If we can understand the reasons, we can change something. And that sort of argument came out of my brain and ends up being in all 15 prisons across the Northwest. And that blows my mind.
That's incredible. I mean, the scale of it is what I think I've always found just unbelievable. I think partly because it's men, and you know, historically, when I was young, when I was growing up, you didn't hear about this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
and I had an experience myself when I was 14. Have I told you that story before?
I know that, yeah, but I don't think you publicly said that before.
Have I not publicly said that?
No.
Yeah, I had an experience then, and I didn't know who to speak to. I didn't have a reference point. I didn't have a. There was nothing. It felt very cold and very clinical. And I had to speak to a police officer, and then I spoke to a female, I guess, social worker type liaison person.
At 14, yeah.
But it was very cold and clinical. I didn't feel particularly listened to or supported or anything. And the work that survivors have done, it blows my mind. Does it? Does it not worry you? Are you surprised by how many men and how widespread this behaviour and this violence is?
Am I surprised? No, I'm not surprised at the reality. What I am continually surprised about is how difficult we still, as a society and as men, we still find it so difficult to talk about. And when I say I'm surprised by that, what I mean is, so 10 years ago, you and I made a short film with the Ministry of Justice whilst we were doing the John Paul rape storyline. The conversations that we were having with the public then are the conversations I'm still having now. That surprises me.
That the conversation hasn't moved along.
Yeah. Not moved along as much as I hoped it would have done.
Is that a government? Is that down to government? Is that down to media? Is that down to a societal, a lack of sort of a willingness to talk about these things, or does it just come down to the fact that men do not like to talk about this stuff and they bottle it up and they often go down dark paths and end up with poor mental health?
I think there's an element of the latter, the bit around go down dark paths, the socialisation of male vulnerability, the way that we don't like it, we don't like to talk about it. Because the interesting thing is, okay, so I can absolutely say, apart from Emmerdale Farm, I refuse to call it Emmerdale. It's Emmerdale Farm as far as I'm concerned. Old school, yeah. So apart from Emmerdale Farm, every single male sexual abuse storyline in a soap opera, continuing drama, etc., I've been directly involved with since John Paul. And so I have absolute lived experience of talking about it and then seeing the impact of it. So from when we did that film with the Ministry of Justice because for the first time ever, there was a male rape support fund. Like, we did that.
That was insane to me. That no money had ever been set aside for male victims of sexual violence blew my mind.
Yeah. And the fact that John Paul was talked about in Parliament, that's the kind of stuff that makes me go, that's mental.
Me too.
And so I remember we were doing the Matthew Wright story, the Wright show, and we were at Euston and you went off on your train, I went off on my train, and I got back and I opened my laptop and there was an email from a guy who had watched us on the Matthew Wright show, and for the first time in 60 years, he'd gone to say to his daughter, I'm so sorry that I couldn't be a dad for you, but I had these real problems because of what happened to me when I was a kid. Which, that's incredible. I see that. Fast forward, and Richard, so our friend Richard Gadd, who's the baby reindeer, we had an 80% increase, literally within the first 2 weeks. Yeah, the first 2 weeks, 56% of individuals who came for help, who rang the helpline, who said, I want some support. When we ask a question of, where did you hear about us? Baby Reindeer, Netflix. And so I see these massive changes and it shoots up and then it falls down again. That's the bit that I find interesting. And I wonder if for our female counterparts, has that been the same? Has there been big peaks and then deep troughs? And maybe that's just society. Maybe that's how we deal with mental health. Maybe that's how we deal with difficult subjects.
I think women have an easier time being vulnerable and dealing with vulnerability. And they're also much better at talking.
I think they're given permission
They
by
are given
society.
permission by society, of course. But if you think about male friendship and female friendship, I think it's really hard to define male friendship sometimes. And I think when we break it down, our friendship groups and the actual people that we can confide in and be really open and really honest with, they're really difficult conversations that aren't encouraged. I always encourage my friends, if they've got something weighing them down, to be open and to speak to me about it. And I don't feel like that happens very often, but it happens a lot in female circles.
Yeah.
I know it does. I know women are much more open about that, and I wonder what we have to do to change that, because the work that Survivors does is incredible. One of the root obstacles is that men don't talk about it. So you're in a situation where you've got men who are saying to their daughter on the back of a TV show, I haven't been a good dad because I've been holding on to this for 40, 50, 60 years. That, to me, is one of the huge issues with it.
Hugely. And I also think as well, though, that there is a slight sea change. So maybe the most difficult thing to talk about is the attack on one's own, the governance of your own body. So you get to choose what happens to your body, and then during an assault, abuse, etc., you lose that power. So maybe that's the most extreme thing you can talk about. But if you bring it back a little bit and think, right, okay, how many more men's groups are beginning to be set up? So, there's loads across the country. I do some work with a fabulous group called Mandem Meetup, and it's literally just a group of lads. And if you look at them, they all look like they're into rap, and they all look like they just go to the gym. I mean, literally, there's a real stereotype look about them. And they do the most incredible stuff together about this healing circle. So much so, and I was so blown away by it when I attended one just to experience it, that we began to do quite a lot of work with them. So they have a healing circle in Survivors, and they just call it the Survivors Edition. And it's just anybody who's a male survivor, a friend of a male survivor, or just wants to kind of be in a space where we can talk about anything. It's incredible. And I listen to the way they talk to each other and the conversations that they have, and even just the flippant bits. Yeah, of course, there's still banter between them, etc., etc. But there's also real compassion. And one of them's become, so Jamie, who set it up and runs it, has become such a good friend. And I was very, very early on when we proper started connecting. I naturally, because I'm such a huggy person, and I was like, right, I'll see you later. And he'd go, yeah, see you, bro, because it's all that kind of stuff. And he went to shake my hand, and I just naturally just gave him a hug, and we talked about that. And he said, that was really special. And I said, there's this Armstead Maupin, a brilliant writer who wrote the Tales of the City series. He talked about years ago this idea of logical family, the family that you create, because the story he's writing in Tales of the City is about LGBT people being rejected by their families. And whilst that's not necessarily my experience, there is something about this logical family. So every time I speak to you, I'm always like, right, love you loads, see you later. Every time I see you, we hug, and you tell me I love you, see you soon. And it feels like really normal language. I think we're maybe the first generation, and so maybe it's going to take a while to seep through, where men are just afforded the same permissions, the same ability to have those compassionate, caring relationships very openly, like females, like we often see females doing. Maybe there's something in that. Maybe this is just going to have to take, unfortunately, a couple of generations to change, because you're changing a culture. You're moving a tanker 360 degrees in a canal. It's just going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It does. I always make an effort actually nowadays to tell my friends that I love them.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important.
I've always experienced you like that.
But I think you and I've always felt personally with you that I can be very open with you and
sure.
warm and
so
loving.
Do you feel like you're able to spread that?
At 100%.
Okay.
Even with, and actually make more of an effort to do that with people who I know, not necessarily that it makes them uncomfortable,
sure.
but who aren't used to that level of connection with another man.
Yeah.
They're not used to that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to create that environment.
Yeah.
Because then you are the person that they will come to if they need anything.
Sure.
And it seems to me that that's been one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest hurdles, I think, for men.
Yeah.
Certainly, when you deal with mental health and you deal with sexual violence, you deal with any of these really deep problems that men struggle with. And I think at their core, it's that they haven't felt permission and they haven't felt safe and they haven't felt loved enough to just be open and honest. And I think you're absolutely right. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think we are that first generation.
Yeah.
We certainly are, because I see it in the youngsters at work. Whenever I go to the studio and we've got 21-year-olds, 24-year-olds. My God, honestly,
being all young and sprightly with their lives ahead of them. How dare they?
Using words like Riz. Fuck off. Stop making up words.
Brat summer. Oh, I'm all over this now.
You're having a brat summer.
I've got no idea what it means. Genuinely. Only heard it last week. Summer's nearly over. I'm not going to start using it.
I think that's Charlie XCX, I think.
I have no idea.
But I see in these youngsters, I see that. I see that they're very touchy-feely with each other in the most lovely way, and they're really supportive. And when you work with them on set as performers, there's no sense of ego almost. They're just so supportive with each other, and they're encouraging, and the playfulness is so important.
That's a really good phrase to use, the playfulness of it, the playfulness of contact, of touch, of proximity, but of language as well. I sometimes think when we talk about toxic masculinity, we're having the wrong conversation. I think it's the wrong thing. Now, that's not to say that masculinity can't be toxic. Of course it can. I think the proper conversation should be about gender norms. So it's not just about the masculinity, it's the maleness, it's the stereotypes, all that kind of stuff. And when I see some of the younger staff in my organisation, and also then think about my godson and my goddaughter and the way they talk, it's so barrierless, or rather there's less barriers than there were in older generations. And I do sometimes wonder if we as older people begin to talk in a very open way. So I love that idea that you are beginning to, or you're very much saying some of the language and using some of the language, and talking about some of the things and the contact with people that would not necessarily have been open to that before. But sometimes I think maybe that's because you can't talk in a language where you don't know what the words are. So if someone dropped me in the middle of rural Japan and I have no understanding or concept of the written language or the spoken language, how the hell am I going to communicate? And I do think there's something about, I keep saying permission, I use it so often, but I do think there's something about, it's not me saying, okay, you're now allowed to do this. It's about me saying, this is okay to sort of use this language. It's all right for us to shake hands, but it's also okay for us to hug. It's okay for me to go see your mate, but it's also exactly the same okayness for me to say, love you, and I'll see you later.
these sound like conversations that you've had with survivors. These sound very much like words and phrases that you've had to use when you're dealing with these men that are victims of sexual violence.
One of the most telling things that anyone's ever said. So I was in prison working with somebody who was in prison for exactly the right reason. He'd committed a number of very, very, very serious offences. Tragically, people lost their lives from the offences that he was part of. And we were having this conversation, and he said to me, "Do you know what I love about talking to you, Dunk?" And I go, "What?" And he says, "It's like I'm talking to a bird, but you're a bloke." And it took my breath away. And I was like, right, okay, first of all, could we please not refer to women as birds? Which he thought was hilarious. And I just said, that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. Thank you so much. And off I went. And I always carry that, because I think the pregnancy of what he's saying is so full of something about care, compassion, all of the things that are not necessarily associated with maleness. He's recognising in a male, and he's a male, and he's seeing me deliver something or hold a space, and he's feeling things, and it's just being okay. And that feels really, really special. Wow. Really special.
That's what it's all about, isn't it, really? Those little moments of breakthrough must be incredible. Yeah, you get men from all different walks of life, all ages, all races, all backgrounds coming to you. What's the sort of common sort of theme there? Is there anything that kind of binds them all together?
So. It's connected into the maleness thing. So I am very, very, very aware that blame, so one blaming one's own self, is something that women often experience as well. However, I'm not saying it's worse for, but there's another level of something, and I've never been able to articulate it other than, and I do that all the time, I just notice myself doing it. It's like an onion, there's another layer of skin, around it, which is something about, I should have been able to stop it, I should have been able to fight them off, I should have been able, this real blame thing. And I remember a phrase when I was doing my master's research around male victims of sexual violence. I remember reading a phrase from an academic who said, shame and guilt have become the hallmark of the victim. And I think, okay, so if you think about, shame and guilt, I did bad, I am bad, shame and guilt. Then the question then that sticks in my mind is, what is it that I did bad? And why am I bad as the victim? And I think when I dig right underneath it, and I think about me, and I think about all of the men that I've ever worked with, and, colleagues would say the same thing, there's something about failure. So the bad is I failed as a man, as a male. And then I go, right, okay, so what is the failure? Well, we write back, if I'm really honest, to dig right down to it, into the very, very basics of gender norms, which is why I always say that's a conversation we should be having, which is essentially the hunter-gatherer. It's essentially the caveman stuff. It's the females, you do the maternal stuff, and the stuff that we associate with females, cooking, etc., etc., and we will do the go out and fight and get money and get food and bring
the care
it back.
Provider.
Yeah, that's so fucked that we are. How long is it since we were cave people? Since we were fucking Flintstones, and yet 2024, and we still, somewhere in our brains, we still carrying that. And I think that's the thing that I see consistently from male survivors, and I consistently want us to talk about it, because I want us to say to everybody, to each other, I want wives to be telling their husbands who are survivors, you didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault. Oprah, who, it's not someone really I want to be quoting, but Oprah and Tyler Perry. So Tyler Perry, the actor and the producer. So Tyler was abused by, I think it was his father, and they did a series when Oprah still had her program, and it was called 200 Men Stand Up. And I nearly ended up going to America to be as part of the audience for it. And they were having this conversation, and Tyler Perry broke down talking about his experience as a young boy being abused and what that means for him as a man and what it means for him as a black man. Something, another level of cultural stuff about maleness and the hierarchy of masculinity and all that. And he said, I know somewhere that there's got to be forgiveness. And Oprah said, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, as if, you don't have to forgive the person that did that to you. You don't have to forgive them to move on. What you have to do is, and this, blew my mind, you have to forgive yourself that the past could have been any different. And, it just gives me goosebumps, that's where my forgiveness is. That's where the guilt and the shame, I did bad, I am bad, I can throw that away because I forgive myself that their past could have been any different. It couldn't have, and it wasn't. And that forgiveness of me enables me then to move forward. That's what I want all men to be able to do. I want all men to really hear that. The past, forgive yourself that the past could have been any different.
Wow. I think we'll have to leave it there. I think that was wonderful. What a lovely ending. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you very, very much. Thank you.